somebody's going to have to bear the cost of this many decades of debt binge profligacy. When you tell regular people who are not even thriving that they have to bear the cost by cutting their holidays, or it's just not, that's untenable.
I don't expect them to be receptive
I'm not
by
saying,
any means.
You're not saying that at all. I'm just saying that feels like a path that's not going to hold. And I think the only way you can do this is because even though they have a lot of money and a lot of power, they have fewer votes because they have fewer raw number of people. The only way is to have some of the burden of this knuckling up, toughening, whatever metaphor you want to use, has to fall heavily and concretely on those who have the most. Like, it just has to.
Yeah, the only solution I could think of here was a debt to GDP ratio during World War II and into the beginning, the early years of FDR's term was extraordinary. And what was the path that we took at the time? Well, we levied a ton of taxes on the wealthiest people in the country. That's not the only thing that's happening around that time period, but I think it was a key part of turning economic things around in a positive direction. Basically create enough economic growth and create a bunch of revenue from taxes and reel in the fiscal damage.
Yeah, people talk about austerity a lot. The one thing I don't like when they talk about it is like, austerity is so fucking terrible. You shouldn't be cutting things. And I actually agree with that. I think for most people, you can't be cutting their health services. This stuff is too harsh on people that need this stuff the most. However, people often on that say, well, we should just keep borrowing. You can't do that either. You have to find a way to balance the budget without cutting the stuff that's most important to people at the bottom of income of society.
I guess that's the question I'm sort of asking is like, how possible is it when you're being pulled in all these directions? Is like, okay, we have all these demands for like defense and military spending because of the situation we're in with NATO and Russia, but I also need to keep all of my incredible like social services and my incredible medical system and my public holidays, all of my provisions for good work-life balance in France. And I also need to reel in the budget somehow. I'm more talking about the math is like, is there literally enough wealth in France to be taxed to like pay for all of that?
It's a fair point. Maybe not.
And the answer, I hope, is yes. Like, I would like that to be the answer. But I wonder if you reach a point of your debt is so big that doesn't get to be the answer anymore. And I don't know what stage that is at.
So let's use the USA as an example. I think that something that people use as a kind of like cure-all panacea when talking about this stuff is make the rich pay their fair share. And nowadays, the term is billionaires rather than millionaires. Going off of ChatGPT, I don't know if these numbers are totally accurate, but there's about 800 billionaires in the US, combined wealth of 5.7 trillion. So let's say about $6 trillion held by the billionaires. Even if you took all of their money, not increase their taxes from whatever it is, 33% to 50, right? You just took all of their money. That would fund the country. Like, that would help our deficit for like less than 3 years. Yeah. That might sound good, but that's a one-time thing that doesn't fix the fundamental spending issues. There's, various questions about whether that's even possible in the first place. That's if you took all their money. If you doubled their taxes right now, most of the money from billionaires and super wealthy people is from assets that are being held. They don't have $7 trillion, $6 trillion sitting around in cash. The vast majority of that is stocks.
So I got a couple points on that.
Yeah. No, I would love a clarification on this because I agree that rich people should pay more money. It feels very silly that we just cut taxes for a bunch of wealthy people. At the same time, the idea that you can be like, the way we solve the deficit is to tax the wealthy, that is massively oversimplifying and the math doesn't add up. We are $36 trillion in debt. We go $2 more trillion every year or more. At least we go $2 trillion.
Could I synthesize?
The math is not even remotely adding up.
Could I synthesize my question quickly? I think taxing the wealthy, we've talked about it before, is probably one of the most important things you need to do, right? Beyond, it's an important part in raising revenue to begin with, but we've talked about how beyond raising revenue, it's an important part of keeping your economic game in your country a healthy thing to participate in, right? There is certainly a point of debt because we've pushed it so far where just raising those taxes is not enough anymore. And in the US, an example we've talked about is like, okay, well, if you pivoted to a universal healthcare system where you can negotiate as a single buyer, you could reduce your healthcare spending a lot without losing anything in terms of quality or availability, right? That's something we've talked about that's important in the US. In France's case, I don't know France well enough to be like, what are the areas that you could cut spending in a similar way? Because eventually I feel like the debt is big enough that you need to do both, right?
You are probably going to have to do both. fully
Yeah.
understood. Two things I want to say to your point.
Yeah, no,
Number
I
one
would
is
love to hear your
you
thoughts.
mentioned billionaires specifically.
Yeah.
What I don't think was mentioned was corporate taxes, which is where there's a much bigger amount of wealth. And they used to be higher. So they've been lowered over decades,
Yeah.
right? So corporate taxes, that's a huge amount of money. And you're not trying to pay off the 32 trillion. That's nearly impossible. Well, the amount of money that we're talking about for the debt to actually pay it off, impossible. What we're trying to do is just get to a balanced budget. We just have to stop it from growing. And so to do that, it just simply cannot be continuing to ask regular people to see a quality of life decrease. They're just already at their edge. It's not politically possible. There's going to be so much anger. Just taking away people's holidays is like almost a comical end of that game where it's like they're shaving off a few billion by giving away holidays to try and balance this budget. It's absurd. That's my point. It's like it's the highest in people and corporate taxes.
Yeah.
And then I guess, yes, of course, some spending cuts. Efficiency ones are the ones that's best, where you can get the same quality of service, but you're spending less on middlemen. But at the end of the day, it's going to be unpopular because we've had it too good for too long. There's been too much debt fueled. And there will be pain. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But who bears that pain is going to be the big question of our next 10, 15 years. It's like,
To put this really simply, we spend $2 trillion more in every given year in the US than we make.
Yeah.
If we can get that down, we can pretend we don't owe an additional $36 trillion, I guess.
Yeah.
So if we can find $2 trillion, but it has to be every year, you feel like at least a huge percentage of that could be covered. I don't think taxing billionaires covers that much of it. You would have to do capital, unearned capital gains tax.
I could give you a little math.
Yeah,
on
because I haven't looked at the corporate tax and how much of that draws.
Yeah, so I looked at this because we cut the corporate tax rate in the United States
in 2017.
in 2017, right? And I wanted to see the difference in that revenue. And from what I just looked at, assuming that corporate profits remain the same through the same period,
which is the
if
big
the tax
question,
rate had remained the same, then we'd be making 200 to 300 billion more a year in revenue if the corporate tax rate in America had just stayed the same instead of getting cut in 2017.
Yeah.
In the current year, we would be making 200 or 300 billion more in like 2024, 2025. So that's not an insignificant amount of money. Maybe you could push the corporate tax rate even higher.
Yeah.
that's what I want.
But
That's what I'd like to do.
even that, it's like, I agree. What I'm trying to do is push back against what I often hear, which is like, well, we just need to tax the rich more. I agree, but the math doesn't make sense to me. That would save us $200 billion a year, right? Again, we need to get to $2 trillion. So that's 10% of the way there. If we have 800 billionaires, let's say we go to every billionaire and say, you need to put up $250 million a year. Let's say we can make that tenable. That's $200 billion, right? So that's another $200 billion. So we've asked billionaires for this crazy amount of money. I mean, not crazy, a large amount of money that they aren't paying right now. We've made $400 billion. We're 20% of the way there. We're a fifth of the way. Where the fuck do we make the rest of it? And that's my concern. And obviously, we have to cut spending in some. I would love our military to go down. I would love our healthcare to go down. I just don't see where we get all the money. $2 trillion is so much money.
I'm even thinking.
I would love
about this,
for it to be rich people. I'm
about
sure there's
this
somebody who's going to comment, but
I'm thinking about this issue outside of the U.S. My basic question for somebody who has a more mathed out answer of this is, what is the threshold you get to where you have no choice but to start cutting spending on things that people like, that average people like? What is the threshold where you have to start doing that no matter what?
Well, you can't do it politically.
And that's very vague, and you can't do it politically. I understand all of these things, right? I get that. There is a point where you have rode the gravy train for so long that you need to make like hard choices, and I'm wondering where that is. And I rather start with things like wealth taxes or like land value taxes or estate taxes, higher income taxes on the wealthy, raise the corporate taxes, all of these things that I think are essential to having a better functioning society, that at a base level, I want to start with all those things because we haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
We've been going in the opposite direction for a really long time. And that's the part that needs to be reverted 100%. But I'm asking like the question of the math. And I don't know, I understand that we don't have like the exact numbers or like the answer.
Yeah.
I'm more curious.
No, I mean, I think the realistic outcome, this is what I hear from people who talk about the same thing, is that we won't figure it out and we're going to run full speed into the wall. And what that means is the cost of borrowing will get so astronomical that you just can't pay. You know, as your debt gets so big, people charge more and more. You have to pay more and more yield to get someone to loan you money. And that's going to get out of control. And then we're going to have to print money to buy our own debt. This is like the end game of Japan. Japan's going through this. Japan just had an election where their far-right party, the Make Japan Great Again type thing.
Yeah, they won.
They're sweeping. And the LDP lost a majority for the first time in the history of Japan, really, like forever. People are angry there because they're at the end game. They have 200% debt to GDP.
Yeah.
They're printing money. They're getting inflation, but wages aren't keeping up. People are getting angry. You got to get political upheaval. If you can't solve the debt problem, if you can't balance the budget, you eventually get it. You can just delay it for a long time, and we have. but you will eventually get political problems. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, the UK sort of had it. They had a budget that was so bad, no one loaned them money, and Liz Truss got kicked out of office in 30 days or whatever.
That's still crazy.
So I don't know. It's happening. It's happening all over. This is a question not just in France, but everywhere. But I totally agree with your question. I don't know how it's solved, but I do know that starting with public holidays or starting with things that are impactful to regular people is a no-go.
Yeah, it feels silly.
People won't, it's not even silly. It won't work. There's going to be so much pushback that you can't get it done. It just, that era of like, we're going to do a little bit of a cost cut and everyone's got to tighten their belts is just not going to work anymore. There's just too much money concentrated in too few hands. Even if they won't fully pay for it, that's where you have to start. I
agree with that. Yeah.
People won't take it, is my honest assessment. I think people are at the end of their rope on it. That's my theory, but we'll see.
No, I think that makes sense.
Maybe if you start with that and you're like, look, corporations and the super wealthy are paying a lot more, and now we have to start going to other areas. It's at least a step that then makes broader society go, okay, maybe we can collectively shoulder this thing we've been kicking down the road forever, but you can't start with holidays. Like it's such a bad.
It's just cartoonish, dude.
It's like, such a bad start, man.
You know?
Can I posture one other thing that I think could save some money before we end? And I've been meaning, I swear to God, I'm still going to do this topic soon. I've talked about Estonia's, digital bureaucracy before.
That's our third pillar, dude.
The third pillar is Aiden mentioning Estonia.
The reason I thought about this week is I've been dealing with a bunch of paperwork related to, my businesses and taxes lately, and just how annoying and complex getting through a lot of it is. It's just annoying. And you have to submit the same information about yourself, the same information about your business. In the case of the company that we own for this podcast, I think I've asked you guys for like similar information like 2 or 3 times because I just need it over and over again for like different agencies or different groups of people or whatever, right? It is a painfully arduous process in so many ways. And from my understanding, Estonia created this incredible model of cutting out a lot of the paperwork and process that people need to do just business or do things in their life like their personal taxes or handle something like their marriage or any interaction that involves paperwork and the government, which is all of them. They have managed to consolidate into a really clean process. Imagine a world where you have like a single profile of your information that's accessible across all of these different government like institutions and websites.
Like Google login, but it fills out your whole form for you.
Exactly.
For the government.
And that is something that saves so much money and time for so many people. Like that, to me, the vague notion of Doge, that is like what could be pursued. That's what efficiency actually means to me. Greasing the wheels of like how all of these systems work. Because I interact with them all the time. And not just if you're a business owner, but just if you exist in society, you have to interface with paperwork and submissions all the time, whether it be for your driver's license, ID, voter registration, whatever, right? All of these systems could be made more efficient and consolidated and digitized and save so much time and money. And I feel like that, and Estonia, that's a huge part of how they started running massive surpluses. Obviously, smaller country. I fucking get it. You commenter who's making a comment right now. I get it.
I was going to say it.
I was
going to say it.
I understand that. Obviously, I understand that. I'm just saying that was a huge course that they took to make things better there and to save themselves a lot of money. I think taking a very conscious and concrete approach to something like that when we're talking about things like this could be really good. Anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it reminds me of some of the Lena Khan stuff.